Today I want to talk to you about use of electronic communication to support and enhance your communication presentation. I came in this morning and I put the slides up, and you might notice the slides are too big for the screen. Something has changed with the software between now and the previous semester that has affected the way it looks on the screen. And I started to get that fixed, but I wanted to leave that just to show you that sometimes it's very important to come try out the computer you're going to be using to do your presentation and see if everything works the same. Frequently, fonts will be different. If you created it on your home computer and you come in, there's a font that you use that doesn't exist on this one. Now the sizes are off, the alignment's changed, or like this, even the focus has changed. So what showed up on my screen and what shows up on this computer screen is not what's showing up on the projector. And that would be important. Actually, one of the presentations, it's very important. I wanted to give you some examples of some good and bad ideas and presentations. So the first one is, what's wrong with this picture? Well, obviously, it's off center, so I need to get the projector changed a little bit, zoomed out. But it's also running off, but it's hard to read, especially up top. The color contrast is very low. This is higher, this is easier to read, but again, it's off the screen. And down here is easier to read. So part of it is easy to read. I had a person once that used a bright pink text on a blue background, and it actually does some weird visual things from the back of the room. And it looked okay sitting in front of the computer screen right up next to it, but if you got up and walked across the room and looked at the computer screen from a distance, you had a better feel of what we in the audience would do. So I recommend trying that out before you save that final version. The other thing that's wrong with this is there are far too many words. The strength of PowerPoint is pictures, not words. So I might shift to something like this. I'm going to talk about the sunset, the trip to Tahiti, the beautiful vacation. You don't need those words because I'm going to give you my words. You just need to see the picture to get the feel. I'm going to talk about peppers, and they're healthy, tasty, and beautiful. So I've reduced the words. They're easier to see. The contrast is better, but the picture is still kind of competing. And it's very blurry. It's a poor quality. The picture here is a higher quality, and the words are easier to see, and I don't really need a lot of pictures. I'm just going to give you the flavor, so to speak. Here, again, too many words. Can we reduce these to, say, from a paragraph to bullet points, or even to keywords and phrases? And I could look at these and read them. So my second point is use them sparingly. I don't have to turn around with my back to the audience and read a paragraph. I can just glance at this one phrase. And then my last point is select them thoughtfully. So, see, I can do that without taking a lot of attention away from the audience. If I have a lot of numbers, I want to give a picture that gives a graphic presentation of those instead of a list of numbers. Even though these are not really good graphics, they're still fairly clear to make the point. Talking about not good graphics, these are very blurry, very poor quality graphics, but even at that, most people can guess this is a story about the Titanic or a speech about the Titanic. So if I'm talking about the salvage of the Titanic, what kind of artifacts have we gotten? I might have this outline. I want to talk about the china, the jewelry, furniture, and books that we've brought back. And this supports my communication by putting my outline up here for me to see, but also for you to see. So it reinforces what I'm saying. On the other hand, instead of telling you about these things with words, I might show them to you. Today we're going to talk about the china, the jewelry, the furniture, and the books that have been brought back from the Titanic. And you see some of those as we go through it. And that begins to enhance communication, going beyond support. Let me give you another example that goes with the spatial pattern. And this would refer to the same pattern we'd use on the 3B or the hometown speech. I talked about, in chronological pattern, I said if we did a tour of the campus and we walked from Liebeier to Melton to Looney, you might think that's chronological because that's the order in time, but it's not really chronological because it doesn't matter. We could have just as easily walked from Looney to Melton to Liebeier. Now what both of those patterns tells you is that Melton is spatially in between Looney and Liebeier. So it's really more of a spatial pattern. Where do things relate to each other in space? And so if I were doing a trip across the United States from LA to New York, I could use either of those two trips to talk about the journey itself and places I stopped along the way. So if I go from the northern route, we might stop at Las Vegas, Denver, and Chicago. And so this becomes my outline. And so you see a spatial pattern and an outline on the board again, supporting me, giving my outline here so I don't have to hold it between myself and my audience, but also you get to see my outline. If I took the southern route, I would have different points because I would stop at different cities. So I might talk about Albuquerque, Oklahoma City, and Memphis. And my first point is Albuquerque. And again, supporting my communication by reminding me of my first point. My second point is Oklahoma City. And I even have put my subpoints. Where in Oklahoma City would we go? But again, I'm supporting my communication. I've given you a picture of Oklahoma City, but it doesn't really tell you much about the city. So it's still just supporting, not enhancing. But now let's say we go to Memphis, which is the word that's up there, is Memphis. And my 3 points are Graceland, Beale Street, and Sun Studios. And Beale Street got cut off down here, but it would tell you A, B, and C. But you can visually see, you know it's Beale Street because there's a sign. You know this is Sun Studios, and you know this is Graceland. But you also have a feel about what is at Graceland, Beale Street, and Sun Studios, because the pictures tell you more than just the words. And as I go to my first point, I can show you the outside of Graceland and some of the things on the inside of Graceland. And one of the things that got cut off below the screen is a video tour of Graceland that I could click on, and we could take a video tour and see more of the things inside. So it's like the saying, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and I'm just showing you the picture instead of using all those words. And so I'm enhancing my presentation with pictures and video. Prezi is another tool you might use. In this example, I will give a presentation about Little Rock. So we start with a picture of the world, specifically the United States, and I figured out Little Rock's going to be about right here. So I'm using Prezi, and Prezi's good for showing those spatial relationships. We see the United States, we zoom into Little Rock, and even Little Rock, as we get closer, here's what the city looks like. And we can kind of see what some of my main points are on the map. So we're going to start with my first point and zoom in to 302 Vernon Street, where I used to live when I lived in Little Rock. And I can talk about this and the house that's there. And across the valley, you can see the backside of the Capitol. And so let's go to the state capitol. And here's what it looks like from the sky and from the grounds. And after spending some time at the Capitol, we're going to go across town to Park Plaza Mall and do a little shopping. And then after that, that's Little Rock and the world. And so you've got a nice feel for where things are spatially oriented in the city. last presentation I wanted to show you because I like the presentation itself, and I thought it was very effective when I saw it, and I was in the audience. The speaker was talking about learning techniques and good and bad ways of approaching learning. And she made the point very clear with a small activity. So we started off and she said, everybody knows what vowels are, right? A, E, I, O, and U. How many do you think you could recognize vowels and count how many vowels are in a list of words? So, how many vowels do you think are in this list? Take 40 seconds to look at the list. And so we looked at the list for 40 seconds, and then she said, now, take out a piece of paper and write down every one of those items you can think of. And most people could remember 2 or 3, maybe 4 at the most. But that's getting up there. Then she said, okay, I'm going to show you the list one more time for 40 seconds. But I want you to know 2 things. One, I'm going to ask how many of those you can remember, so you know what the question is now. And I'm going to tell you that those 15 items on the list are arranged numerically, 1 through 15. So you can start looking for the pattern. And she showed the list again. After 40 seconds, she asked, how many of those can you write down? And most people could get at least 8, so double the highest score from before. And some people could do 15. Without looking, I know I can stop and think 1 is $1, 2, 2 dice, 3, tricycle, 4, 4-leaf clover, 5 fingers, 6-pack. So you see the pattern and you can remember. So if we go over to 12, the next one is 13, which is an unlucky Friday. 14 is Valentine's Day because it's February 14th. 15, there are 4 quarters in an hour and they're 15 minutes apiece. So if you know the pattern, it's easier to get the things that follow after it. Studying is a lot like this. A lot of students will sit down with a book and say, I'm going to read chapter 2 in my history book. And they just read, like you looked at that first list. And then you get to the end of the chapter and you don't remember much of it. But if you know the pattern and the questions that are important, you can read for those things and retain more of the information. So instead of just sitting down in paragraph 1 and starting to read, maybe go through and look at the headings in the chapter. What are the sections about? What are the pictures? What are the captions to the pictures? Are there charts and graphs? Now you're starting to understand the pattern. What is this chapter about? Next, what are the questions that are important? Maybe there are questions at the end of the chapter. You could go read those, and as you're reading through the chapter, you're answering those questions. The teacher might have hinted at what are some of the questions that are important as you read this chapter. Even if you don't have those things, as you look at that pattern, what questions come to your mind that might be important? What are things I want to know about this point in history? So I'm going to read to answer those questions, and I will retain more of that material. So if I'm doing that speech, this would be a great activity to get my audience into the topic and help them to see the value of what I'm going to be talking about. So PowerPoint would be an excellent tool to set that up. By the way, this comes in chapter 4. There's a page, it used to be a handout, about using PowerPoint, so you can go over to chapter 4 and see some of these highlights, kind of a quick summary of that, but here are some examples.